Hey guys, Richard Holdner here and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to answer the following question for LS owners. Should I run a truck cam or a performance cam? And what's the difference? In this video, we're going to take a look at a comparison between a stock LM7 5.3 liter truck cam to a stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 truck cam from Brian Tooley Racing. We're going to then compare those to a big boy performance cam. And when I say big boy, it's actually more of a medium-sized boy because it only has 227 degrees of intake duration. We're going to take a look at peak horsepower, peak torque. We'll take a look at the whole curve, including the bottom end where there might be some losses associated with the bigger cams, and talk a little bit about what applications might need a converter swap. In this video, I'm going to jump right to the end. I'm going to do something that they never do on YouTube. I'm just going to show you the results right at the very beginning here so that you can get going and go on about your business and do all the things that you want to do. Or you can stick around and I can talk about the other tests that I did while I had this motor up with the dyno. And we ran a number of different truck cams, and we're going to compare the truck cams to this cam that we eventually put on here and made lots of power. But I'll go ahead and show you. Here is the drum roll, please. So here is the stock cam on a 5.3 liter. This was a junkyard motor I had taken apart. We put ring gap in it. I put head studs on it and head gaskets the way that I always do it in preparation because we knew that we were going to run boost. It had the stock heads on it, 706 heads. We put valve springs in it. We ran it with 1 7/8 long tube headers and a Holley HP management system. We ran it first with the stock cam, which you see here in blue, and it made 359 horsepower. And also, it had a Trailblazer SS intake manifold, which helps it produce a little bit more power than the standard truck manifold, intake manifold, and the 92mm throttle body, and it made 384 foot-pounds of torque. And here's what happened when we put the camshaft in it, and the camshaft that we put in it was a Comp 54-454-11 camshaft. I'll go ahead and put the specs up here for you. It's not the biggest cam that you can run. You can actually step up to the 459 or the 469 cam on a 5.3 liter. There is available piston to valve clearance to put that in, or other cams that are similar from Brian Tooley Racing or Texas Speed or Cam Motion or any of the good cams that are out there. Anything with, somewhere in the 230-ish range, 232, 233. At 50, depending on the LSA, will fit with the factory available piston to valve clearance. The interesting thing about this test is this is the most powerful stock headed 5.3 that I ran in all of the testing. Normally what we would do, and I have this video up already where we ran a 5.3 and we upgraded it with heads, cam, and intake. We'd ended up putting it in the fast intake, trick flow 205 heads and a slightly bigger cam than this. And we could get the thing up, get going up toward 500 horsepower, 480 or so. This particular one with the cam and the stock heads actually produced 467 horsepower, which it did very well, and 418 foot-pounds of torque. After we put a fast manifold in this, and you'll have to wait to the end of the video to see that, we made even more power than this, because as we know, the fast usually adds more power than the Trailblazer SS. But here is probably the most powerful, like, cam-only 5.3 that I've run using the stock heads. Like I said, a lot of times, because in a lot of previous testing, we've used the 205 heads or ported versions of this head like I did with a lot of the big bang motors. But if you're going to put a cam only thing in and, do cam and springs, the Trailblazer SS intake manifold obviously worked very well if you've got long tube headers or if you're prepping for a turbo. This is a good combination. That 454 cam works good. So does the 469 or 459 or a lot of other cams from the other manufacturers. So if you want to take off now, feel free, or stick around. We're going to talk about the truck cams in comparison to a regular performance cam. Now that we've jumped ahead and shown you the big performance cam, let's take a look at the milder versions, and those are the truck cams. This was a 5.3 liter as we talked about previously, and we were running all the Brian Tooley Racing stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 truck cams on this 5.3. And as I said, for some reason, this 5.3 did seem to do very well. It made good power. Probably, or part of it was because it had the Trailblazer SS intake manifold on it. because that obviously is better than the factory truck manifold and the truck intake manifold. And so the gains that we get might be a little bit better because that thing allows it. But each one of the steps is still going to be the same thing. And I know this because we did the same test with truck cams with stock exhaust and headers. And obviously with the headers, they start out a little higher and they end a little higher, and it does the same thing. The relative gain is about the same between the two. So you still get good gains even with the factory truck exhaust manifolds. But on this 5.3, again, it's another one that came from the wrecking yard, and some of them seem to be a little bit better than others. You know, they vary by 5 or 10 horsepower when they're starting out. This one with the stock LM7 cam shaft for the 5.3 liter made 359 and 384 foot-pounds. And what I wanted to show you is we're going to go over the different truck cams. I'm going to show you why I would usually select the milder of the 3 camshafts, but you guys can take a look at it and decide for yourself. So this is the first of this is a stage 1 truck cam. Equipped with a stage 1 truck cam, the power output jumped to 411 horsepower and 407 foot-pounds of torque. And here's what I want you to see is we started the run down at like 2,500 RPM. Very little difference in power down there. In fact, maybe a slight loss down there, but not very much. I mean, we're talking 1 or 2 foot-pounds. And then gains going from about 2,900 all the way out, and then gains, you know, lots of gains as we pass the 4,500 RPM mark, and then out, all the way out to 6,500. Although it made peak power quite a bit earlier, before 6,000 RPM, which is not surprising. I'll go ahead and put the specs up here for the stage 1 cam so you can kind of compare it. But basically, stage 1 cam, you get good gains everywhere on this 5.3. And by the way, this is the cam of the truck cams that I recommend for the 4.8 also, because on a 4.8, this is effectively a wilder camshaft on the smaller displacement. And you start getting into a point where you need converters on a 4.8 before you do on a 5.3, and especially on a 6.0. So here's what happened when we put the stage 2 truck cam, and again, I'll go ahead and put the specs up here for the stage 2. It was just, you know, a little bit bigger, I think about 8 degrees. So we, not surprisingly, with the stage 2, we did pick up power, and the peak power jumped up to 421 horsepower. So basically a gain of 10 horsepower over the stage 1. And this is what I want to get into, and a little bit of a gain through the curve from 3,500, but basically the gains were most prevalent between the stage 1 and the stage 2 from 5,000, let's say, on out, and even maybe a little bit higher than that. So if you're revving the motor out, and we ran this one all the way out to 6,500, the stage 2 obviously is kind of a better choice, but don't expect gains down low from the stage 2. And we are starting to see a drop in power below 3,000 RPM with the stage 2 cam. And that gets even worse or better depending on your outcome. So the stage 3 cam, and again, I'll put the specs up here so you guys can take a look and see what the cam specs are on the stage 3. Again, just a little bit bigger than the stage 2. So the power output went up to 433 horsepower from 421. So again, another 10 or 11 horsepower above the stage 2, which was 10 or 11 horsepower above the stage 1, but only from 5,200 or so, 5,100 on out were they better. In the case of the stage 3, you start trading power. In fact, it was down below the stage 1 and the stage 2, all the way out to 4,400 or so. So the stage 3, you might be given the drop down low, which is quite a bit, down here at 27 or 2,800 RPM. You're looking at 328 versus 345. So it's a pretty good drop in torque. You might be considering converter at this point, especially on a 5.3 and definitely on a 4.8. So what I want to show you is if you take a look at these curves, you'll see that the big gain, the biggest gain came from just putting the stage 1 in compared to the stock cam. It had a big change in power through almost all of the curve, the peak horsepower, peak torque, everywhere. It was just better. And then the successive stages 2, 3, and even 4 also have a little bit more power, and most of it is concentrated at the top of the RPM range. So if you're running there, it's definitely a good gain. But don't expect big power changes between a stage 1, 2, and 3, like at 5,000 RPM, we're showing hardly any difference there. So up to that RPM range, the stage 1 and in this case the stage 2 are probably better choices. If your truck is shifting at 5,500 RPM, then there's no need for you to try to take advantage of all the other things that the 2 and 3 might offer out to 6,500. So now let's take a look and see what happened and how these compare to, the bigger performance cam. Now we can compare the truck cams to the stock cam and also to the performance cam to see what the trade-offs are inherent in stepping up in cam profile. So this is our stock cam, and we'll go ahead and bring our truck cams back up. We're going to take a look at the stage 1. And then here's the stage 3, because there's no reason to put the stage 2 in there. We know that it's right in the middle. And so you can see we got fairly good gains, but here's what happened when we overlay these versus the comp 54-454-11 cam. And I'll go ahead and put the specs up there if I have not already, which I think I already did. But you can see that that camshaft, performance-oriented camshaft, more lift, closer to 600 stuff rather than the mid-500 stuff. Also 227 degrees of intake duration and 240 plus degrees of exhaust duration. You can see that it made quite a bit more power than even the stage 3 truck cam. It started making more power than those cams at about 4,500 RPM and then carried that up quite a bit. So again, as we talked about in the first video, in the first segment, 467 horsepower and 417 foot-pounds compared to the stage 3 with only 432 horsepower. So I know immediately right now your question is, yeah, but Richard, you only tested the stage 1, 2, and 3 truck cams. What about the stage 4? Well, if we assume that the stage 4 follows suit to the 1, 2, and 3 levels, we could assume it picks up another 10 or 12 horsepower, which would bring it 10 or 12 up from here. But since we saw a difference of about 30, actually more like 35, compared to the stage 3 and this bigger cam, we know that this bigger camshaft is going to even make more than the stage 4 truck cam. But what I want to point to also is if you take a look at the other end of the curve at the 3,000 RPM range, you see that the bigger cam, the 227 cam with 227 intake duration, also lost low speed power compared to the others. And we saw that happen with the different stages of truck cams. This one lost even a little bit more power down low compared to the stage 3 truck cam, and we would see probably that the stage 4 truck cam would probably split the difference in between those two in terms of the loss in low speed power. And you'll notice that both the stage 3 and this cam were below the stock cam, out to 32 or 3,300 RPM. So you would definitely be thinking maybe converter if you have an automatic. If you got a manual trans, that's less of a problem. But it just goes to show you that, with a performance cam, you're definitely going to get more power. And now you're making peak power at 65 or 6,600 RPM, revving all the way out to 7,000, which is good. But the other thing I want to point out is, again, this is with a stock cylinder head with just a valve spring upgrade. And then as the finishing touch on this test, let's take a look and see what happened when I put the fast LSX-RT intake on 102 millimeter throttle body. We got the highest power of the day, and that was 479 horsepower, 479.2. The highest peak torque also, I believe, yes, 422 foot-pounds. Although you can see it traded a little bit with the Trailblazer SS below 4,500. The Trailblazer SS was up just a little bit on the fast manifold, but out past 5,500 or 5,700, the fast manifold was responsible for some fairly good gains. Like out at 7,000, it was a lot. It was 459 versus 478. So, excuse me, nearly 20 horsepower out there. Again, that's 1 RPM range, so you'd have to look at the whole thing to decide whether or not it was worth the extra expense of the fast, but I'm showing you what it did. And the reason that I showed you this is because this thing made really good power given the fact that it just had basically stock 706 heads with a valve spring upgrade. I'm now wondering what would have happened if we would have had a ported set of these heads, a ported set of 243s, or even the TrickFlow 205 heads. Maybe this thing would have gotten close to, the 500 horsepower mark. And also, what happens if we put a 231 cam in it instead of the 227 cam? Lots of stuff to discuss, but let's get to our conclusion. Okay guys, what's our takeaway in this comparison between the factory 5.3 liter LM7 cam and the stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 truck cams from Brian Tooley Racing, and then that comp 54-454-11 like the big boy or medium-sized boy performance cam? Well, here's the thing, and this is something I always go over when I talk to people about truck cams because I get those questions all the time. Hey, which one should I put in? And the very fact that there is a stage 2 and a stage 3 and a stage 4, and I'm sure if they made a stage 5 and a stage 6, they would sell those too, because 3 is better than 2 and 4 is better than 3 and so on, and people buy them like that. And I like to show them this dyno data and say, hey, look, is your truck designed to shift? Is it programmed to shift at 6,500 RPM? If it's not, there's nothing there for you to take advantage of. If it is, then by all means do that. And if you want the doo-wop cam, if you want to get the shake, get the shimmy, you know, if you want to sound cammy, then a bigger cam obviously works. But just know that when you do that, you get the gains higher out in the rev range. And also the trade-off, as always, is down low. And if there's so much of a trade-off like we see in some of these bigger cams, especially with the smaller motors, I'm talking to you 4.8 liter guys, you're probably going to need a converter. Armature holder, make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. I'll keep testing.